Hi students, in this video, I'm going to go over how to do topic 4 assignment strategies for reaching all students. So for this assignment, you're going to be thinking about the students in a classroom that's kind of a mock classroom that you're going to get. And you're going to be thinking about how can we assess and meet their individual needs. So you're going to think about differentiating instruction for students based on their readiness, interest, and their individual learning goals. And you're going to determine some instructional strategies that you can use for these students based on assessment data. So you want to start by using the class profile, which can be found right here in our topic 4 materials. And when you open this profile, this is going to be your mock class. We use the class profile in a lot of assignments throughout this program, so you'll get used to looking at this. But if this is the first time that you've seen the class profile, let me take a minute to kind of zoom in and go over how to read this class profile. Okay. So as you're looking at this, you can see the students' names are listed in the left column. And then the next column indicates whether or not they're an English language learner. So are they speaking English as the first language? And if they are, then they're not an English language learner. And if they speak a different language at home as a first language, then they would be yes for an English language learner. And so this will tell you which students are coming to your class not fully mastering the English language or passing any English proficiency tests. Sometimes this just means that they speak maybe basic English, but they don't always, you know, they haven't mastered more complex English, more academic English. So many of the students in this class profile are not English language learners, but you can see that yes, some are. Now, when we look at the next column, that's your social economic status. So you can see students coming in with low SES or mid SES is mostly the makeup of this class. So not very many students come from high economic backgrounds. Then as you continue, you'll see the student's ethnicity, their gender, and then this next column is IEP or 504, and this is if they're receiving special education services. And you'll be able to see that if they do have one, they tell you what it is for. So it's a learning disability, an emotional disability, or sometimes there'll be like behavioral things as well. Then you'll see anything else. So if they are tier 2 RTI for reading, that means that they're receiving a response to intervention. In other words, they are receiving an extra dose of reading because they're not at grade level in reading. So this correlates directly with their reading performance. So if they are 1 year below, typically a lot of times they'll get RTI for reading. So if they will land in those tier 2 reading groups. If they are more than 1 year below, let's see if any of our students here, you'll see they say tier 3 for reading. That means they're 2 years below, and so they need 2 extra doses of reading and math a day. So they get pulled for groups twice outside of their regular lesson. And you'll notice that this student is learning disabled and he's receiving that extra support in both reading and math. Um, and you can kind of look at if their parents are involved and if they have internet at home. So that's how you read this student profile. Now you're going to imagine that this is your class and you just gave them an assessment. And you're going to choose a standard in ELA or math standard, and you're going to decide, you're going to pretend that you gave them an assessment, and whatever the performance level you see on this student profile is how your class performed on that assessment. And so you're going to use this to inform some of your instruction as you're coming up with a plan to differentiate for your students. So that's how the assessment part comes into this assignment. It says using that student data in the class profile, create a differentiation plan and present it as a digital presentation for the content area and grade level of your choice. So you'll pretend whatever grade this is. It could be kindergarten, it could be seventh grade. That's up to you. And you're going to use this as a professional development to inform new teachers on how they can implement differentiation in their own classroom. So you're going to use the class profile and you're going to make a presentation on a PowerPoint. And so first you're going to identify what state or national standard that you hypothetically assessed where you got these assessment results from the class profile. So let's say it was a fractions math standard. So you can see that maybe students were performing at grade level 2 years below. You had some that are above grade level. And so that's how your assessment data came out for that fraction standard. So then you're going to create a slide for each of these. And I would recommend just using these as the headings in your PowerPoint presentation, because when you use this as the heading, it aligns directly with the rubric. The rubric has each of these areas, and it makes it super easy for me to grade and see where you've covered these topics. So you see the first area is going to be readiness, and you'll have to look at that class profile and it'll describe how the group of students, based on the testing of results, you're going to tell us who's above grade level, who's below grade level, and you'll let us know kind of their readiness for that standard. Then you're going to look at the interest of your students, and you'll include a strategy that you can use to figure out what would their interest be in this particular topic that you are teaching. So maybe fractions, for example, how would I see if my students are interested in fractions? And maybe you could ask them about cooking or see things that they like to do that include fractions to see if they'd be interested in learning those. The next area is your differentiating. You're going to explain how you're going to differentiate your instruction based on that standard and the results of the assessment. So now I'm thinking of, okay, I chose fractions at a third grade level, but I have a few students who are 2 years below grade level. And so what am I going to do to make sure those kids can be successful with this fraction standard? And then what am I going to do to challenge the kids that are above? And what am I going to do for those kids who are on grade level to teach that standard? So you're going to give an example of some ideas on how you can support those different groups of students' needs when you are teaching that standard. And so this is a really important part where you want to build your toolbox of strategies. So in math, we love to use hands-on materials. We love for students to have visuals, visual models. That really supports with some of that differentiation. You can also think about the language learners in your class and how could I incorporate language or help them with language, like having a word bank on the wall or lots of pictures to help them understand the language. The next slide is technology. So you'll just identify one method for using technology to differentiate that instruction and be specific with what tool specifically. It's not just, I would use, a website, but what website would you use? What's the name of the website? And how does that tool specifically help with this standard that you identified? Because if you choose a tool that is for reading and the standard is about math, that wouldn't be a helpful tool. So you want to think about all of this when we're thinking about this specific standard in that teaching. As you go down, we have the progress goals. So you're going to think about how you're going to determine students' progress in meeting that standard. So what are those small steps that students will take to show mastery of that standard? Sometimes our standards can have a lot of skills or parts in them. So you'll determine the smaller parts in an effort to meet that larger goal of the standard. For example, with fractions, my standard might be that students will understand that we partition equal parts to make fractions, and that might be one part of that standard, but the whole standard includes several other parts to it. So that might be my progress goal. And then you want to think about the subject that you're teaching, the grade that you're teaching, the strength students would have, and then their need for growth. So some students might need to show it fractions with just pictures or manipulatives at first, and that might be just the first way I'm going to go. And then later they can represent it as a symbol, or they can start drawing models after they move away from the manipulatives. And so you can see we're taking slow steps for maybe our lower students, where the higher students, you might push to higher levels. Okay, learning preferences is the next area, and you're just going to describe how everyday instruction considers our learning preferences. So, things that I think about when I think about learning preferences are often I'm a visual learner, or I'm an auditory learner, kinesthetic learner. Those are some of our learning preferences. Also, thinking about groupings or working alone, um, or getting to read ahead of time before the teacher shows me, or I like to listen to the teacher first and get a lecture before I try myself. So, those are all learning preferences. And then finally, you're going to want to summarize how data informs your instructional decisions. So, how do we use this data to make determinations on how I'm going to teach any standard? And then, or this specific standard, either one. Identify at least one goal for yourself in the areas of using data. So, what do you want to do as a teacher to help yourself use data to inform instruction? I often see that teachers are very data rich. They have a lot of data that they get from the kids. They're doing worksheets, they're doing whiteboard practice, but we're not reacting to that data. We're not collecting it and going, oh, these are the kids who don't get it, and grabbing them and helping them. Sometimes we wait too long, and then the data just becomes invalid. So make a goal for yourself on using data, and how you can either use it for instructional decision making, differentiating instruction, determining students' interests, and using technology. So always, when you do PowerPoint presentations, always include that title slide, references. You want to use APA to support your ideas in the slideshow. And when you're looking at that slideshow, make sure that you include those speaker notes. So you want to include the bullet points on the bulk of the standard, just bullet points, but your long extended writings should go here in the speaker notes, where you can support it with your citations. And if you don't see your speaker notes, they're often down here. I click notes, they disappear, and I click it and they reappear. So those are your speaker notes. Make sure that you use those as you're writing your presentation. What would you be saying to your audience as you are presenting this slideshow? Don't forget to check your rubric as always, because this tells you how I'll be grading. And like I said, this rubric aligns directly with all those bullet points written in the assignment. And so you can see I'll be grading you on each of those. So if you make these all slides, it'll make it super easy for me to grade each of these sections. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.